You got holidays planned for you too?
No, we've just been on a holiday.
Oh, where have you been?
We went on a train holiday, Amsterdam.
No, because I normally have the extra ones to put all my stuff, yeah.
So,
Is that the Great Round?
yes. No, we went with the kind of big ones. So they all your trips and they're slightly flexible, so you can change them. And tickets will from into so
Oh, right. Yeah.
it was very good. Hotel, we upgraded it. No, we went on the far to first class. So they
We went.
trips and they're slightly flexible.
Yeah, it's really.
Good evening, members, and welcome to the meeting of full council of North Norfolk District Council on Wednesday, the 19th of March. And first of all, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have Councillor Butakova, Councillor Heinink, Councillor Penfold and Councillor Spagnola.
Could you add Councillor Eric Vardy, please?
Yes, and Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Vardy and Councillor Taylor. Thank you.
Yep. Minutes. So we are to approve the minutes. Are they actually here? There aren't any minutes, actually.
In that case, Chair, if they're not here, we could take those over to the next meeting.
Yes, as it does say, please note the minutes will follow. Okay, do we have any declarations of interest from members on any matters to be discussed this evening? Councillor Punchard, did you?
Yeah, under advice of the monitoring officer as an employee of Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service, just to declare that I work for them in employment due to the LGR.
I wrote to members, as there's some members that are dual hatters and some who potentially work in public authority, and advised that there was a general dispensation in regard to items 12 and 13, so the devolution matter and the local government reorganisation matter, but advised that members should still consider themselves whether they think they can participate and vote nevertheless, and should declare any interest that they do have.
Okay, thank you very much. Items of urgent business. Chairman's communications are slightly less visual than normal. So I have two items to talk to you about. I went to HMP Bure, and this was a very illuminating visit. And I'm very grateful to the officers who spent so much time showing me around. And I was struck by the calibre of the staff and the quality of the estate. And what came through very strongly was the focus on welfare and well-being. So that was a very interesting trip. And then we had International Women's Day panel. And many thanks to Emily Katz and Catherine Van Batten for organising this. It was very interesting to explore the different perspectives on International Women's Day and the potential it holds. And we're hoping to hold the event next year as well. Thank you very much to all the panel members.
I attended it.
Okay, do you want to speak then?
Yes, and I attended Inspiring North Norfolk, which was well hosted by Trimmingham Leisure Centre, and there was a real buzz about the room. And those of you who didn't go missed some really good canopies.
Do we have any leaders' announcements?
Briefly, so whilst we've been continuing to make progress across many fronts as detailed within the portfolio reports quite extensively, and having set our approach for the year ahead within the new annual action plan, most of our time and our attention over the last month has been tied up with the discussions on devolution and local government reorganisation, the subject of considerable discussion this evening. So I wanted to just briefly thank members, cabinet and most of all officers across the council for continuing to make the strides forward that we are doing despite the scale of the challenges and the implications ahead. And it should be drawn to everyone's attention. This is arguably one of the most important meetings of this authority's history in its 50 years. So, clearly we need to make some progress through the agenda to get to those items, to give them the fullest possible discussion. So I'd urge that we do that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any public questions or. Do we have any appointments to committees? Subcommittees? No changes? Okay, lovely. So that brings us to the portfolio reports. I think Councillor Ringer wanted to speak briefly before we started the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, in addition to my written report, I just wanted to give members an update on the response to the collision in the North Sea of the Solong and the Stena Immaculate. As members might be aware, there's been reports of nurdles, which are small plastic pellets that have been coming ashore on some North Sea coasts. These have been found in very small amounts on North River District beaches, isolated to the Wells and Holcombe area, where we have had officers stationed throughout today as part of a multi-agency response. There have been no reports further east at this stage. At the moment, it is not advised for members of the public to touch these pellets, but to report them to the Humber Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre, and the details, contact details for those are on our website and on Facebook. And if possible, to use a what 3 words location or grid reference to help. Finally, I'll just give the latest Coast Guard response, if that's okay, from 5 p.m. today, which is that the counter-pollution retrieval operation remains ongoing, with HM Coast Guard and other specialist counter-pollution assets continuing to support this response. This includes supporting local authorities who are leading the onshore response, both in Norfolk and in Lincolnshire. Aerial surveillance flights continue to monitor both vessels and the retrieval operation. As the incident has now moved into the recovery phase, HM Coast Guard has downgraded the assessment of the situation and no longer considers this to constitute a major incident. HM Coast Guard will continue, however, to support the salvage and multi-agency retrieval operations while keeping the overall situation under review. And if I can just conclude by passing my thanks on to the officers at this council who've worked incredibly hard over the last week in monitoring this situation and keeping all the key stakeholders updated. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I concur with that. The communications were very good. Thank you. We'll open the debate on portfolio. To portfolio holders who'd like to ask any questions. Okay, Councillor Mancini Boyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off the block, brilliant. My question is to the portfolio for finance, Council Shires. My question is, I recently received my electronic council tax bill. On it, there's a footnote on the email that says, think before you ink. Do you really need to print this? This is quite ironic as a few days later, I received a paper bill in the post, which I did not need. Why are we not encouraging residents to opt into e-billing? This would result in considerable savings in officer time, council funds, let alone the reduction in the council carbon footprint. Thank you.
That's a really great question. I will get a response to you by email if that's okay.
Councillor Bayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Councillor Ringer. Please can we have an update regarding the extended producer responsibility scheme at North Norfolk District Council?
Thank you very much. The extended producer responsibility scheme is part of a scheme started by the previous government, which is part of their simpler recycling programme, which also includes the introduction of food waste, for example. The extended producer responsibility has not started yet, as I believe my understanding is. There will be a financial benefit to this council as a result of that. I don't have the exact figures to hand, but I'm happy to speak in more detail with Councillor Bayes or any other members if they've got any more specific points in particular.
Councillor Boyle?
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Councillor Varley. Can you tell me, what does local government reorganisation mean for net zero? Please.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good and important question. So simply, to start off with, the devastating effects and implications of climate change have not and will not disappear just because of council structures changing. Our net zero targets are really, really important, and it is crucial that we continue to put these practices at the heart of our day-to-day business in the operation side of the council, and ensure that we continue to inspire and give astute information to our communities to ensure that they are living a greener and healthier future. That's really important. And Madam Chairman, as I'm sure members will have read in their reports this month, we have begun to review and make effective changes to our environmental charter and NZAP document. Now that's the net zero strategy and action plan document. And actually, this review and the LGR process has come a sort of good time, because we were wanting to review and make reflective changes, partly based on where we are on the journey of net zero now, starting in 2019. A lot has changed, but also taking into account the challenges we face from LGR. So it's really important that we review that, put in effective changes, and emphasize certain aspects. As I've said so many times, net zero is a journey. We are still on that journey, but we will be going down some different avenues because of LGR now. But it's really important we stick to our net zero targets. And in regards of the changes to the environmental charter and the NZAP document, that will be going through the committee rounds, that will be headed to ONS at some point. And I'm excited and I can't wait for good constructive feedback and input into those documents from the scrutiny committee. Thank you.
Councillor Cushing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Councillor Toy, please. How many planned registered businesses were started up in 23-24, and what is the survival rate? And how many are planned for 24-25, or do you have an idea for 24-25 at least?
They're not numbers that I immediately, thank you, Councillor Cushing. They are good questions, but they're not numbers that I have immediately to hand, but I can get those for you. And I'll check with you after to make sure that I've got the periods that you've asked for, 23, 4, 4, 5. But thank you. I'll be happy to do that.
Councillor Punchard?
Thank you. Question for Councillor Adams. At the last full council, I asked for an update on 9 Norwich Street, Fakenham, and was informed this would be discussed at future business meetings and cabinet. Wondered if Councillor Adams could provide an update. I have emailed Officer Fulshire also for updates to be provided for the local members. Thank you.
Yeah, clearly, Councillor Punchard, we spoke about this before the meeting, and there's not an update we'll be giving publicly at this stage, other than that things are certainly progressing in terms of that route, and discussions continuing at cabinet level in terms of the following actions. And clearly we're looking at a legal route here, so we won't be playing those cards publicly, as I said in the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Leith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Councillor Adams. Are the devolution plans, once finalised, likely to be put to a referendum?
So I think I heard it correctly, was whether the devolution plans, or perhaps the devolution LGR plans, might be put to a referendum. This is something I have been asked by residents and members of my own group before. And I do think it's an important point, because I don't see where residents are going to get a say in all of this at the moment. And we're talking obviously about the most significant change in the local government landscape for 50 years. I don't want to preempt too much of what I'm saying in the next two items, of course, in terms of some of the implications of those changes, in terms of the role we play in North Norfolk, in terms of our local economy. And actually, what I will say, though, is that the role North Norfolk District Council has played has been very distinct compared to many other local authorities, in terms of its provision of discretionary assets and services. I can only speak for myself when I say I disagree with the cancellation of the county council elections this year. Who knows what will happen next year? I would say the government's position on the local elections is not particularly coherent, because they said, well, it would only be cancelled for a year, but yet the Deputy Prime Minister has also said that she doesn't see the point in having elections for an authority that won't exist for a long time. So they've clearly got to square that circle at some point. But we look at what Bretland have just started doing in terms of the consultation. I'm keen that we follow that lead, but I do think there's room for a debate or a discussion here at North Norfolk as to whether we should indeed consider having a referendum on these changes in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Councillor Varley, please, what percentage of NNDC energy is supplied by solar PV?
Thank you for that question. It will fluctuate, but I think it's important actually that I try and get a specific figure to you, and I'll do that via written response.
Thank you.
Councillor Netherway.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just hang on until Tim comes back, because my question's aimed at him. Timing is everything. No, that's all. Tim, in your report, you said that there's been an increase in certain work streams at East Law, which results in a 50% increase already, though I think that's welcomed by everybody. Are you able to give us any information, any details on what those how those increases have come about, so that perhaps they could be built on in future?
I think maybe it's best we give a written response to you, just to give some greater detail in terms of the work that East Law is doing. I'm glad it's of interest, because it's probably not something we've discussed an awful lot in recent times. East Law's been a real success, I think, for the authority, both in terms of what it does internally, but also externally. This mirrors a question I think we had about 2 months ago, where I was talking about the work we're now doing in terms of coastal change at East Law, and how that will increase the workload, but also potentially the income. We're aiming to be a sort of leader in that area, If you think about, you know, the legal implications where a property is lost due to coastal erosion, and the fact that, you know, we're seeing this occur more and more, particularly along the East Coast, but potentially elsewhere, it's a potential source of external income and work. But yeah, there's obviously all sorts of demands on East Law. So perhaps it's best we have a further discussion about that, maybe starting point with some written information for you. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a question for Councillor Toy, and it's about hotels. In my other hat, I'm the County Councillor for Fakenham. One of the things I get on a regular basis are updates on the progress of the E148 roundabout, which is designed to facilitate the new build, both housing and businesses at the north of Fakenham. One of the things remarked on by the project manager to me last Friday was where we're working at the moment is on the plans. We're not going to put it back to Greenfield because it's a site for the hotel that's shown in the plans. I was just wondering what work's been done to encourage people like travel, just for instance, as Travelodge or the Holiday Inn Express, that type of hotel that could encourage overnight stay for businessmen as well as tourists, because there is a shortage of hotels in the hinterland, but it would boost local business such as the racecourse. It would increasingly encourage spend to remain in the local area and encourage the stopovers, but also possibly allow some of the nearby facilities to do small places that have no overnight facilities themselves. I mean, I know Fakenham Racecourse has a caravan, but but I think it's really important that we have hotel facilities and people can offer packages. And we have a dearth of this. And I certainly was trying to push it 10 years ago, and we don't seem to have got anywhere in the interim. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That's quite an in-depth question. And as you alluded to, it's quite a landscape of opportunities for people to do. We've obviously had the challenges around a potential hotel in Sheringham, and this is very much for people to bring forward. We engage with companies all the time, and to see if we can encourage people here. I've got no one specifically for the Fakenham site, but we do keep those opportunities open. So yeah, I can clearly say that for that site at the moment. But obviously, hopefully you would understand also sometimes companies approach us and talk about the possibilities, but that's confidential because, you know, they don't want the competition to come along and do that. So there is an advertised site in that it's there and it's on the plans. And if anybody comes forward, we would be happy to do that. And as I go around, because I sit on the Norfolk Business Board as well on behalf of the council, and we'll engage with anybody who wants to come and take these opportunities in North Norfolk. But we also understand that the hotel industry, it's in a state of flux. They're always changing. One that I use specifically on the coast here for, I personally use it for, I'm the secretary for an RAF association branch, and that's just changed hands unexpectedly. So a lot of this stuff goes on under the radar. If you have someone in mind that you think could come forward, then I'd be happy to talk to them. But the models for Premier Inn and Travelodge are often, it's a developer that commits to several years, and they guarantee an income from it. So again, the business models are very different. But to find an independent person to build a new site is going to be difficult. So whilst that's not answered your question specifically, we have no one there in mind, no one we're specifically engaging with. We always will look for those opportunities when they're there and engaging. And I'd be happy to obviously update members when it's appropriate if we have anything specific that's going on there. I agree, we do need to give those opportunities. We know that tourism is a £500 million industry and we need to continue to support it. But again, as you alluded to in your question, we need to support businesses because there are some amazing businesses in Fakenham and the area that need accommodation for people to come along as well. So I accept your question. I don't know if that's really answered your question because there is no specific answer for that. But if there's something further, I'd be happy to take that up with you.
No, thanks. I think that's been very useful. I think it's the combination. It's often business people won't stay in if you want, tourist hotels. So we lose those people. They go back to you know, they come up to Fakenham or do the businesses roundabout, and then typically they'll maybe go to Kings Lynn or more often Norwich. And when they stay overnight, even if it's just for one night, all their spend is done in Norwich, and we lose the benefit of the spend, sometimes considerable spend. So there's that, but also just that small scale, similar type businesses, similar type accommodation that could then use some of the facilities roundabout. So I'm glad you got it in mind, and but I think it's a very different market from the tourist market, even though it can help the tourist market. It's those businessmen that or businesswomen as well that I'm thinking of. So I'm glad you got it in mind, and if I hear of anyone, I'll definitely speak to you. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah, it's very much a commercial decision on the person who develops the site. Thank you.
Do you have any more questions for portfolio holders? Or shall we move on? Move on. I've been notified that the minutes were in some of your agenda packs and they were online. It's just unfortunate people who didn't get them. But in fact, are you happy now to review the minutes and approve them? Have sufficient of you had a look at them?
I'm happy to propose them personally, but if members have only relied on the paper copy of the agenda received this evening, or perhaps at an earlier date, but you know, I'm open-minded here. I'm happy to propose they're accepted. I did feel that they were an accurate record of the meeting personally, and so I'll put that proposal there. But if you know, if there's any dissent, I'm comfortable that we defer them. That would just be my position.
Okay, what do members feel about approving them now? Would you like to raise your hands if you're happy to approve them now? So, unanimous, isn't it? Except for the people who weren't here. Yeah, that's unanimous. Okay. They're approved. Thank you very much. So now we have the recommendations from Cabinet from the 3rd of March, which is item number 10. And we are to approve the changes to the capital programme as laid out in paragraph 5.5 of their report, which is on page 65 of your agenda. Is that for you, Tim? Also, is it for you?
Well, the overall
Councillor Shire?
report is, but I will hand over to the finance portfolio, Councillor Shires, if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
I know last meeting members listened to me quite intently, so I won't go over it too much. So at the meeting for the budget that we held last, I announced to this council that the period 10 monitoring report was in. And we've discussed that at Cabinet, and we discussed it last week at Overview and Scrutiny Committee. When we reported on period 6, there was almost £1 million overspend, and we've brought that down in the 4 months that have been since. The reasons predominantly are when we looked at budget monitoring for this financial year, we chose to at each monitoring period project where we would be at year end rather than where we were at that period monitoring, just so that we had a better grasp on where we were headed. So I would just like to extend my thank yous to every single staff member who rose to the challenge of closing the budget gap, and every single member of this council who has indulged me very regularly when we've talked through the budget monitoring process. But specifically, I'd like to thank Overview and Scrutiny Committee for working alongside me and ensuring that we're monitoring the budget very, very solidly. So a nod to everybody in Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The point about 5.5, that relates to some changes to the capital programme, and in the majority those are due to adjustments because of grant funding that we've received, with the exception of 5.5.7, which is the removal of a budget line purely because the project has been completed. So that's 14,000 that will be removed. But again, a huge thank you to everybody that has worked with me to get us to this position. And it's not over because we've got the next financial year to look at from the end of this month. Thank you very much.
Good. So these points are on page 73 and you'll have all looked at them. Do we have any questions? Councillor Hasden.
Thank you, Chair. I have been absent, so there may be an answer lurking in the papers somewhere. If we just go to page 72, 4.3,
The level of cash balances averaging 28 million instead of the budgeted 33.8 is due to delays in receiving grants from the Environment Agency. If we then go across to page 73 with 552, there's an increase in the capital budget covered by an additional grant from the Environment Agency. If we've got a delay on one hand, are we looking at delays on the other? And is there an accumulative effect of the delays from the Environment Agency in settling the grants?
By cumulative effect, do you mean a delay in the work?
No, I mean a delay in the receipt of the grants, because obviously it's impacted the investment levels. And I just wonder what a further impact it may have if there's a delay in the Environment Agency with the capital increase in the capital budget.
So in 4.3, it says that the schemes were put on hold. And I guess that is where we are overall. So as we know, the Flash project, we'd intended to start a little bit sooner, but with delays to the funding come through, we couldn't actually start the work without the funding. Does that help answer your question?
In part. And so the additional grant from the Environment Agency, presumably that comes through on receipt of the works completion.
I don't believe it comes through on completion of works. Officer Blatch?
Staged payments on authorised invoices. So we make staged payments to the staged claims from the Environment Agency against a grant offer.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? No, so we have a proposer. Councillor Showers and a seconder. Councillor Adams, and all in favour? Any against that we haven't seen? Any abstentions? Okay, lovely. So that's right. Do we have any recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There was only one that was relevant to full council, and that has been covered in item 10, and it relates to the budget monitoring report, which was considered and was supported and recommended that full council accepts, and we've just done that. So we've gone full circle, Madam Chairman.
Very neat. Thank you very much indeed. So now we move on to item 12, which is the devolution. And before we go on to discuss this point, I have a proposal that we suspend standing orders for these two items. Just for item 11 and 12, which relating to devolution of the local government reorganisation because of its import to us and to the people who live and work in our district. And I want to make sure that we have a chance to really debate it and satisfy our residents that we've actually really had a chance to understand what is in front of us. And the rules of our constitution, chapter 2, paragraph 18.10, allow a member to speak only once during debate and for no more than 5 minutes. And I propose to suspend that rule to allow any member an opportunity to speak on a second occasion if they so wish. So I'm proposing this. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adams, and all in favour? Okay, I can't see any against or abstention, so it's unanimous. Might it be you, Councillor Adams? Thank
Yes, well, I'm glad you proposed suspending the standing orders, because to start with, it'll probably be me that's talking for quite a long time. But I wanted to obviously give members the opportunity to, well, in terms of this item, perhaps pick up on the individual responses. So this is the first part of this significant change to the local government landscape proposed, and the government is consulting on the establishment of a mayoral combined authority here with the 7 questions, which we wanted to give the council the opportunity to answer, and subject to your agreement to do so this evening, of course. And across these 7 questions, there's been the opportunity to say whether we strongly agree, neither disagree or agree, disagree, strongly disagree, or don't know or don't wish to answer, with the opportunity to provide a written response, which is, I think, really where the value is. And we've therefore proposed responses to those 7 questions this evening for your consideration and hopefully agreement, but certainly, as you've indicated, discussion. The first question is, to what extent do you agree or disagree that establishing a mayoral combined county authority over the proposed geography will deliver benefits to the area? And what we're saying there is that we support the broad thrust of proposals to devolve powers and funding to Norfolk and Suffolk, and this will hopefully go some way to dealing with an emerging inequality that exists on a nationwide basis in terms of Norfolk missing out. And we should recognise the real potential that exists for North Norfolk around public transport improvements, alignment of adult skills around our economic and social needs, house building and economic functions. However, I do share concerns that have been raised by others about the scope of the powers and responsibilities not being quite enough to meet the aspirations and needs in terms of infrastructure, and whether that devolution could go a step further. Sort of referring there in terms of, you know, the infrastructure process, the decision process in terms of road building and that sort of thing. And in respect of whether the powers of the Police and Crime Commissioner should be absorbed at the earliest opportunity. In terms of whether the mayor delivers benefits for our area, that is, of course, will certainly depend on that person and the government of the day, and it's not possible for us to measure now in terms of, but in terms of principles, I think we should support this. Perhaps we're not quite as convinced yet, possibly, to say that we strongly agree. So the second question is in terms of the proposed governance arrangements in relation. So that the second question is in relation to the proposed governance arrangements, and we do have some concerns over district councils and perhaps later unitary councils not having a seat at the table, despite the significant statutory responsibilities we undertake and the discretionary role we play in the local economy and other fronts. Governance here has got to reflect the local geography, which is varied across coastal, rural, urban areas with distinct economies, and we're concerned about what may emerge in terms of representation lacking for our areas and, of course, others across Norfolk and Suffolk. In terms of the economic priorities of the mayor in relation to question 3, this will, of course, mostly depend on their programme and priorities in addition to that government of the day. We do not know, for instance, what interventions the mayor will want to take to support the hospitality industry, who are facing significant challenges in this district alongside other sectors, of course, and nor can we ensure that there is not a geographic focus that disadvantages our district. It's critical that rural businesses and the rural economy is not overlooked entirely with a solely urban focus, and perhaps a focus along the primary route network of roads. It's also crucial that our small towns continue to receive the attention they need, playing such a crucial role in our local economy. With the ongoing work needed in terms of placemaking and public realm interventions that may become harder to ascertain for the emerging unitary councils with such a heavy focus on statutory services. And I think that's, you know, an area where this council has excelled. The greater economy of Norfolk cannot be allowed to wither. But as has been reported recently in the media, we have seen more businesses than ever before in Norfolk. And as reported in writing in a previous report, in Councillor Shire's report, we have continued to see business rates growth here, in contrast to so many of the local authority areas. We're increasingly rarer, in fact, in that respect, and thanks in part to some interventions by local authorities. So we've got to continue to promote the great opportunities we have here in North Norfolk, of course, as well in terms of diversifying the energy industry. Now, in terms of the fourth question, we do have some scepticism over the scale of the likely achievements in respect to the social agenda. We feel this is an area where smaller authorities, better connected to local communities, will continue to make the biggest difference. And I'm personally not sure how coherent the government vision here is across a geographic area the size of a small sovereign nation. And therefore crucial, I think, for the mayoral combined county authority combined county authority to work with the existing landscape of local authorities, educational institutions and third sector to realise the changes Norfolk and Suffolk needs. But I'm certainly sceptical about the strategic mayor achieving a system-wide change or changes on this front. In respect of the geography, again, in relation to question 5, the concerns about scale are obvious and a recurring theme here, and may of course lead to concerns about a heavy imbalance of focus and service delivery emerging. And there are certainly risks that the new local government landscape may be considered remote and inaccessible. In terms of the natural environment and the 6th question, we certainly have significant skin in this game with numerous high-value landscapes and ecologically and biodiverse features, some of which are incredibly distinctive, even in North Norfolk. And through long-term planning, strategy and collaboration, we do certainly would want to recognise that real improvements can be realised, and that's certainly been seen within responses of certain bodies that are concerned with the natural environment. Finally, in relation to question 7, some overlap here in respect to the previous questions, and of course, which we have referenced and repeated in our proposed answer about the potential for some localities to be overlooked. That's clearly a concern for us in North Norfolk. You know, to what extent will towns such as Stalham and Fakenham and others appear on the radar? We've encouraged parish councils and other prominent bodies to respond to this consultation, and I'd certainly encourage you to encourage others to do so in the remaining time around the room. Beyond these questions, I have to say that it is an increasing concern of mine over what the real benefits of introducing a mayoral combined county authority will be. Will the prize become smaller and smaller as this occurs in so many locations, perhaps everywhere? Will residents accept an additional precepting body for what it delivers, and what it delivers will be the key measure, of course. So these are key questions, and we've got to approach them with our eyes open as local representatives. So most certainly happy to discuss the proposed response, and we're keeping open-minded about making any potential changes that members may wish to members may decide are necessary. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Fredericks. Do you want to speak now or speak later?
I can speak later. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right, members, the debate is open to you. Does anybody have anything to say? Cushing? Councillor Cushing?
Actually, these are going to be fairly brief comments. The Conservative group's actually going to abstain on this particular agenda item, principally for the same reason. We're going to take a similar stance probably on the next agenda item, simply that I think at this stage it's too early to understand the details for an awful lot of this, and we don't know what we don't know at the moment. But instead of sort of repeating myself for the next agenda item, I think I'll actually reserve my sort of comments and speech for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm only going to speak in regard of question 3 and as it sits within my portfolio, in that I believe that is a positive, and it's right that we agree with that. I've attended things like Transport East Summit, and in fact, only last week I went to the East of England LGA Infrastructure and Growth Conference, and it's clear that these mayoral authorities, in terms of delivering things for the economy, work. But I do have the concerns that have been raised about representation locally and how much of the pot will thin out. But I did feel that I should add that, as I've seen evidence within my portfolio work, but just for people to consider in the debate. Thank you.
Councillor Shahs?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer my thanks to both our Chief Executive and our leader, Tim Adams, for the work that they've done with town and parish councils in the 2 engagement events, which were exceptionally well attended, and the reflection of what was spoken of there. I can see that in our responses as well. There was very, very great amount of debate at both the events. And I just wanted to thank you for opening the door for everybody to be involved in the next steps forward. Great success. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to speak in some general terms. I think should you bear in mind that England is probably the most centralised part of the United Kingdom, and the UK as a whole is probably one of the most centralised countries, both in Europe and probably the whole of the English-speaking world. And devolution is a step-by-step basis, and once in place, it gives the opportunity to build on the deal the way Manchester's done. Manchester's, I think, in deal number 13, and they've brought real abilities into that area. It's the opportunity to do what we always talk about, get powers down from Westminster and get those decisions made by someone who's elected rather than simply decisions made by civil servants, because like it or not, the East of England, despite it puts a lot of money into GB UK, is often further down the queue when the civil servants want to give out money. I think we all appreciate things can't stay the way they are, because otherwise they will really stagnate. And I think something else to bear in mind that, you know, the mayor of the most rural commune in France has actually very, very wide-ranging powers that lots of us be quite jealous of. And those mayors are regularly consulted by central government. And that's what central government here is going to do, work with the mayors. Like it or not, that is the stated aim. And I think we need to bear in mind that it's government policy. This is coming. We need to embrace it because it's a real opportunity. Let's go with it. I'm not going, I think I agree with everything it's said about we need more detail tonight. We're more detail than we have tonight, but further down the line, if we build on what's there, we have an opportunity to do something that's worthwhile for this area.
Councillor Withington.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzpatrick, I would agree with some of those comments that you've made. And I think overall there is a positive feeling towards this aspect of devolution, but it's about getting it right for Norfolk and Suffolk. From a tourism point, which comes under my portfolio, I think there are great benefits from Norfolk and Suffolk being seen as working together, in that this gives us a strategic approach to tourism. We have lots of arts, culture and heritage in both of our counties, and I think there's huge benefits to be made from that. But I also agree with the comments that have been made about the governance within that, and I think that's really important. You talked about centralisation and moving it down into the lower echelons and having the power down there in the decision making, and that's what we want devolution to be about. So though it's really important that the areas within the overall counties and that patch that now becomes joined as one actually is represented by local people, so that decision making genuinely becomes within the people and they can see that decision making being relevant to them, and that they have a role to play in that decision making as well. So I think, you know, overall, I think, yes, it's positive and we should be looking with, you know, positivity towards it, but with a word of caution and making sure that we are pushing for that governance.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be brief. We could chew the fat on this matter all night and still not be any significantly further forward, quite frankly. The big issue, I think, is that there is a huge paucity of information, relevant information. And I think in those circumstances, it's really important that we keep an open mind and that we don't have any preconceived notions. We may have our views, but quite frankly, moving forward, we need to move forward on an evidence-based basis. And I think this is too early yet, and I don't lay the responsibility for that at this authority. It certainly rests with central government in terms of the timescale, but I think the importance that we attach to this, I think, is in that context. It's premature, it's too early, we don't have enough information, and we need to, at all costs, keep an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions or comments?
Well, I just wanted to respond to some of that really, because you know, the points of Councillor Dixon, Councillor Fitzpatrick certainly resonated to me. But you know, I've not disagreed with anything anyone said, which is you know, I suppose a good place to be in terms of the debate. And I suppose the questions that I'm agonising over, really, in response to Tom, to Councillor Fitzpatrick, is, you know, will, after more and more authority areas, more and more counties see these deals, will the prize remain convincing? Will it reduce? And you know, how many more Manchesters will there be? I think gone are the days really where the government can continue throwing millions of pounds at an area and just allow them to do what they want to do, and so many other budgetary pressures. So I think, you know, we've got to do our best to push for this to be the best possible arrangement for our district's residents. Of course, you know, we're one voice among many, and I suppose I'd also question whether the powers go far enough. And of course, you know, we talked about not having all the detail yet, but is it going to be convincing? And you know, I just think, you know, maybe there's a little bit more that could be done in terms of some of that decision making in terms of major infrastructure projects and other such things. And you know, I think you know, a rightful comparison there in terms of the mayors of the French region. So, but we certainly cannot afford to try and work outside of this process, and that goes for the next item as well. So certainly, just wanted to also thank officers for their work in producing the responses here, and really listening very carefully to the observations that we've already made in terms of doing that. And as Councillor Shires has said, in listening to the observations of the parish councils as well, they were very well attended events, and we were really very grateful for the dialogue that we had, you know, across the district. We thought that was really valuable, and you know, perhaps as as more substantial detail emerges, we might find there's reason to do something similar again. So, but thank you for you know, efforts around the room to promote that, and you know, having the frank conversations you are now with your parishes across the district. Thank you.
I was going to say something, if that's all right. I mean, I do think there's not enough information to actually make a decision, and I think that I hear a lot of concern about the local voice being lost in this particular process. It would be wonderful if we did get lots of money and lots of power handed down, but I'm a bit skeptical about that. And I think that we have to remember that our residents are the most important thing, and we have to at the centre of what we do every day. So I hope that we'll all bear that in mind. I mean, I did have one point. I agree with most of the comments that you make, but I don't, apart from the one on the environment, which I don't agree with, but I don't know that we're going into that granularity of detail tonight. But I don't think that, you know, aggregating environmental mitigation is the way to go. Actually, I think for a place like North Norfolk, it's actually disadvantageous. And I wondered what the evidence was that strategic environmental mitigation was better than doing it on a local level. So I would take issue with that particular point. The others I broadly agree with. Thank you.
I know. It's, yeah, I think you've made the point very well, actually. You know, I think this is, again, you know, this is a point where we don't have enough information. What role is the strategic mayor going to play in terms of achieving real positive outcomes on an environmental level? Because it's been mentioned so briefly, hasn't it? It's really precious little detail we're working with. People can see the potential, but it's not quite being spelled out. And you know, clearly there's a role there in terms of improvements in biodiversity, and you know, we've got some challenges around the county, around chalk streams and the health of those, and the strategic planning functions. You know, I think you're right in many senses, because I think there's always, you know, a local solution needed to, and a local plan often needed for these areas. And you can't compare some of the different environments we've got across the district. So yeah, I really value that observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think that's actually a really astute point you've made, and what Councillor Adams has answered. You know, I agree fully. You know, we don't know the information yet. It would appear that it's almost an afterthought. You know, that the level of detail is quite concerning. But there may be benefits to it. I will remain positive. You know, it would allow for overall strategic analysis, but there will be a loss of local plans, local details, and I think that's what district authorities do really well. We know the areas. There are specific environmental issues which we are tackling and appeasing really well, and the concern is that that will be lost. But unfortunately, there's just too little detail at the moment.
Just to say that each individual in this room or anywhere else is at liberty to fill out this questionnaire. And if you disagree or have other views, I think it's quite important that everybody gets involved in this process. And so I'd just like to remind everybody that individually we can all fill these forms in, and I have done so already.
Councillor Houston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the environmental point, and more specifically, I mean, we are a very rural area. Norfolk's a very rural area, and agriculture is a significant feature of the rural area. The North Norfolk coast is not only biodiversity, but it's Ramsar in part, which is global designation. And we've seen in other parts of the country with degradation of not only SSSIs, but also of wider wildlife areas. And you cannot deal with that on a wider regional basis. And the fact that we have the likes of Manchester and areas like that, they are significantly urban and we are significantly rural. And I think that's a fundamental point that is very difficult to draw out of any response that we've got to make. And whilst I appreciate the responses have been made, I can't see really how any further you can enforce anything or state our case or put a flag in on these points about rurality, the rural nature, the farming communities and the wildlife and the Ramsar sites. They are vitally important globally, apart from anything else. So I know this statement has to go in, but somehow we have to be very strong on certain points, and we must enforce those at every opportunity we get.
I think Officer Blatch is going to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not able to comment. I indicated to the Leader of the Council around the precise answer. What you're being asked to do under this item is consider whether the Council should respond to what is a government consultation. I accept that the information is relatively scant. It is on the .gov.uk website, so individuals in this room and beyond are able to see the 7 questions. And in his introduction, the Leader of the Council said in what format the government is inviting comments: strongly agree, agree, neither agree or disagree, and then onwards. So these are proposed responses to those 7 questions that reflect what we believe in discussions between myself and the leader and the engagement work that we did with the town and parish councils and some key stakeholders, because we have reached out to Norfolk Wildlife Trust, the National Trust, Visit North Norfolk and others in drafting this response. And the response to question 6 highlights the importance of designated landscape and habitats. It asks whether at a strategic level there would be benefit from that. And you already work in a number of strategic partnerships with Norfolk councils around green infrastructure, levies and tariffs. Is enough of that coming to North Norfolk, given those visitor pressures? Is there the potential through a mayoral combined authority to see more of money come up, recognising that these sensitive environments are a destination, which is positive in some respects, but there could be damage in terms of seasonal pressures or traipsing or walking in some of these locations, and whether in the context of some of the big infrastructure investments, particularly in terms of renewable energy, we are getting a benefit into North Norfolk from those mechanisms, community infrastructure levies or community benefit payments. And I think the question seeks to answer, or the response seeks to answer those sort of questions in the context of which the government has asked it, but it's not a complete picture. It is on the basis of the way the consultation is structured. But we have got this opportunity to respond collectively as an organisation or as individuals through a public consultation which runs until the 13th of April. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Officer Blatch. That was helpful. So is everyone content then with the answers that have been provided on our behalf? And I would just like to say that I think you should all be answering on your own behalf, but the collective response has more weight. So it's all very well going in and saying, I strongly disagree, but you know, you're just one little person. And so I think our response is very important here. But is everyone content with what has been put down? Councillor Adams.
I was just going to say, did we want to suggest any changes in terms of the response to question 6? Because, it's in your, it's your opportunity to do that. We've got a little bit of time, left, as we've heard before the closure of this consultation, 13th of April, I believe it was. And, you can change the initial response in terms of agreed to, either disagree or agree, or agree or disagree. And you could strengthen that a little bit around localized responses and focus if it would be helpful, whilst maintaining, we recognize that there's a potential for a strategic approach, but saying with an area such as ours with lots of visitor pressure, it's got to be, what's the correct word I'm looking for? But it's got to just be inclusive of our environment, hasn't it? It's got to take that into account. So I don't think that's problematic. It's reflective of our very rich natural environment, isn't it? So I mean, just to put that out there, if we wanted to change that response, I'm open-minded about
Councillor
doing
Withington, do you want to speak? And then I'm going to propose.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the comments, Officer Blatch. It was quite helpful in understanding a little bit more about the strategic approach and how we're involved in that. But I do think we should consider, or I would like to see us consider, changing agree to neither agree or disagree, in that I would also like to include something that strengthens that local aspect of looking after and protecting our globally unique landscapes that we've got in some places in terms of chalk streams, and not relying on, as you said, strategic mitigation of environmental landscapes. So I would like to see that, and I think there are some pluses, but there are also some negatives, and I think that needs to be reflected in our comments. So I don't know what the process for that is, but
Well, I mean, if we can achieve that by consensus, that's more powerful than a vote. So, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. It's just to second Councillor Withington's proposal of amending from agree to neither agree nor disagree. Thank you.
Can we take a vote on that? Ma'am, would that be correct procedure, or do we have to go through this motion thing? Yeah.
No, we can take a vote on that amendment. I don't know if there's anything else anyone wanted to add before that.
So we're voting on the section 6 on the environment. Did anybody want to amend any of the other comments? On any of the other items? No?
Councillor Frederick. I can wrap up first, that'd be lovely. So this document is a series of consultation and answers. We need to make a decision on being in it to win it. We cannot be faint-hearted with this. The government have set out their criteria, rightly or wrongly, but we need to fight for North Norfolk. So I ask you to lend us your voice, and we can put that in that consultation and take it to government. Because if we don't do that, then the government are quite clear that they will impose their own on us. So this is why we're bringing it to council. We're gathering all of our voices together and we're saying as one that we want the best for North Norfolk. And in those discussions that will follow this, we will need all your voices again to say what is best for your communities. There is no choice. And in the following item, I will be saying the same thing. If we do not put our heads together at this critical moment, then the government will enter and pop our heads together. So we really need all of your voices to support the people of North Norfolk at this time, at this monumental meeting that won't ever happen again. But we need to be in it to win it and to discuss it with government, because if we aren't, then they'll just dismiss us and inflict their own rules and regulations on us and their own mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so now do we need to? Okay, so Hank.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, this is, given the paucity of information, I think this is on balance, a very balanced document, putting the pros and cons of the various considerations. I do have some sympathy with the views that have been expressed on item 7, which I think probably is shared by members, in that we're actually saying disagree, and I think that's correct. But where we're saying agree on other items, I think that is a balanced view, given the information. I mean, we don't know what powers a mayor will have. We don't know what money will be distributed. So we're talking about things in principle rather than in practice. So I think the people involved in this have done a great job, quite frankly, and I commend them for the work they've done.
Okay.
So there's proposed amendment.
Yeah, so we're going to propose to make an amendment on question 6 to go from agree to neither agree nor disagree. Is that correct, Councillor Withington? Listen to the text.
I've written some words down, but they probably won't be council-y enough. So I don't know how we do that.
We don't need to, do we need to decide the wording now? It's not it's not like an amendment, I don't think, is it?
I think we've got the thrust of your principles. I mean, if you can share that offline, Councillor Withington, I think that would be useful. We'll try and capture that in. But I think we've, the intervention was really valuable in terms of that, and quite thought provoking actually. So we'll capture that in, and I think that's absolutely fine. In terms of trying to agree the wording by design of the entire membership of the council, we could be here a while. So that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else they want to say? Does anyone want to speak again? Given it's your once in a lifetime opportunity, so to do. You make the no? Okay, shall we go to the vote then?
So vote on the
amended version of the letter.
So it's so we're voting on the amended version of the letter, which is in Appendix 1, basically. So that's for, against, or abstain. Is that correct? It's going to be a recorded vote or just a, no, is it just a general vote? Okay, so would anybody in favour, please raise their hand. Against? Against? I think you've all been I think you have been counted.
Can I just say, so that was 23 in favour, none against and 11 abstentions. So the amendment is carried and now you need to take a vote on the now substantive item, which is the whole.
I just hope we can achieve a consensus, really. This is, I think that's possible here.
Got my voice carried. Those in favour then, please raise their hand. And those against, hands down against, and abstentions.
Okay. So that's 23 in favour, none against, 11 abstentions, so it's carried.
Item 13, which I'm assuming is you, Tim.
Yes, it is. Thank you. In common with the leadership of neighbouring authorities, where the position of the local councils is to be established in both planned and extraordinary meetings, both tonight, yesterday, this week, tomorrow. So I'm aware, for instance, Kings Lynn have already taken their vote this evening and supported the model that we are proposing on our agenda, and certainly they did yesterday at Norwich. Didn't do so at South Norfolk. And votes will take place tomorrow at Breckland with a similar agenda, similar set of proposals. But I will start by saying I do have some significant concerns about the local government reorganisation agenda. And personally speaking, I do support a Greater Norwich Unitary, which I think will reduce the constraints to growth and house building there and possibly enable the rest of the county to benefit from that growth, coupled with the needed public transport improvements that should occur in the county. I do think there's much to be gained from a Norwich Unitary. However, I don't see that same opportunity existing for the rest of the county as it stands. I remain to be convinced, and I'm open-minded, but I remain to be convinced as it stands. I see more risk than reward here for North Norfolk. And as we know, North Norfolk and the Broads are visitor magnets, and I feel we have such a strong recognition across the country, if not a brand recognition. And we shouldn't underestimate the significant role we have played and continue to play in the local economy through the provision of an extensive public realm portfolio. Largely unparalleled. It includes Cramer Pier, the promenades, public spaces, country parks, and I'm going to say it again, more public toilets than any other Shire district in the country. People like it when I say that. And this is in addition to award-winning levels of support to businesses during some of the most difficult and challenging times, and leisure and sports provision for our residents, where again, we're unusual in operating more than one and soon to be 3 swimming facilities. And that's a huge, it's a magnificent achievement. It's probably maybe not recognised by the residents that live here, but if you live elsewhere in different district council areas and move here, you might recognise that there's rather a lot to what this council has offered. There are a few who I think are comparable in respect of the levels of these discretionary activities, and frankly, we did bloody well at it. And given the context of reduced resources and pressures related to housing and homelessness as well. And I think this is something that spanned multiple administrations, different political administrations across decades. The government's position in respect of the future of such assets has been, to say the least, at best, I should say, at the best, vague and potentially ruinous at worst. And with no clear future for these assets and the prominent role they play in the local economic prosperity in the area, I can't support this agenda, and the government has so far not provided the assurances we need despite being asked. So just a reminder, I did write to Lisa Nandy, Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. I believe it was mid-January, yet to have a response on that in respect to that this particular issue. And these concerns are deep-seated with these new possible single unitary authority responsible for significant service pressures around adult social care, children's services, special educational needs, in addition to our existing pressures around housing and homelessness, and also the redistribution of various council debts, which might impact on capital funding capabilities, which is another area where I think this council has excelled in terms of its capital programme. This is in addition to the fact we will see these huge units of local government, such that we must really question whether it's local government any longer. However, what we're saying is that if we have to have it, recognising the government's agenda, 3 would be more desirable than 1. A single unitary for Norfolk would cover a geographic area the size of 20 Birminghams, or if you like, 2 Luxembourgs. Whilst Norfolk County Council exists, certainly, I think it's us that are at the coalface and the cut and thrust at a local level, and I question whether the single model is even local government at all. And the experience of other significantly sized local authorities so far saddled with debt and grappling with remoteness is that this approach is failing on so many accounts. And that should not be what we aspire to do here in North Norfolk and Norfolk and Suffolk. And I'm greatly concerned about how this will be perceived as the reality emerges. And I alluded to that in an answer to a question earlier on. A lot's been said about the cost of implementing this change in the media and supporting documents, and whichever model is chosen, we're looking at costs of certainly a medium to large capital size project in terms of IT amalgamation, payroll amalgamation, or disaggregation, somewhere in the region of the costs of another 1.5 to 2 Fakenham swimming pools, if you like. And I think very little is being said by ourselves at the moment, though, the politicians, the local representatives, about the ongoing costs of this to residents beyond the implementation. Not the cost of implementation, but the costs on the council tax bill. And I feel this isn't responsible. And if you look from the bottom up, there'll be town and parish councils, some of whom will be taking on discretionary assets in greater number. You look at certain villages where we worry about the future of certain assets. And some, in the cases of larger towns, it's not our fight. But if you think about Norwich, Kingston, and Yarmouth being formed for the first time, And then we have council tax harmonisation, the process by which the new precept and council tax bill across multiple former authority areas is introduced. And that will drag the council tax bills up higher. And finally, we have the new precept for the strategic mayor. And I feel all this, if all of this takes place across a single unitary, the cost will be higher, regardless of the cost of implementation, which I think is a bit of a moot point, actually. And it's something we need to be discussing. We need to be discussing the ongoing costs. Our residents, I believe, are in for a shock in terms of the council tax. And if the public service delivery is less convincing in terms of improvement and the retention of what our local authorities have achieved, and I'll just pause there because I really do actually feel our neighbours across different political colours do a really good job. I really do. And I don't think, you know, if unless we get this right, I don't think it's going to be supported. We mustn't be blind to that fact. And at this point in time, I believe we are being. And I fear that we are doing this at the expense of real public service reform too, that's badly needed, crucially at this time in terms of social care. The can just keeps getting kicked down the road even further. Moving the deck chairs into a smaller number of rooms will not be an achievement. And we should recognise district councils were created to be an appropriate size and scale to deliver the distinctive services needed for areas such as North Norfolk. So therefore, I reluctantly support the position of trying to achieve the best possible arrangement within the government's agenda. And to me, that is a 3 model or a 2 if that is all we can get. And that is based on the fact I believe we should strive for authorities that are best able to represent these large geographic areas, taking into account the government wishes on population and wishes to see authorities that better reflect the economic needs in support of devolution. And it's in this respect that we as Norfolk District Councils commissioned a report by Deloitte to support this position. The scoring of each option are set out on page 162 of the digital agenda and 156 of the paper copy. And as you've seen, we believe the 3 unitary model scores the higher across the measures, including public service delivery, financial sustainability, and support of the devolution arrangements, and cumulatively the highest scoring. The projected costs of implementing, which I've just discussed, are set out in 168 and 162, or the paper, or 162 of the paper copy, I should say 168 of the digital, and projected councillor numbers based on 1 to 5,000 electors set out on the following page. Based on, beyond the evidence base within the Deloitte report, we have the local government reorganisation interim report, which follows the Deloitte report on pages, I think it's 185 of the digital agenda and 179 of the paper. As you can see, we've looked at an east and west plus a greater Norwich as we determined this was the best way of achieving the scale of population required, a sustainable tax base, and ensuring the creation of a greater Norwich area, which was mentioned by the government ministers several times in Parliament today. And just to, break from what I was saying there, Norwich, Ipswich, Exeter, they have been mentioned several times in parliamentary speeches, but it would have been really useful if the government could have said at some point subsequently that they thought that the Norwich Unitary was a very good idea. We think that's going to, because it will save so much effort in terms of this work that we've been doing, obviously in a mad rush, and it has been a short time as we've discussed under the previous item. I absolutely appreciate there will be concerns about the potential of splitting North Norfolk's existing district, keeping in mind we have a strong brand and identity, probably more so, I would say, than the other areas of the county, or certainly alongside Norwich. However, we must remember 2 things. North Norfolk District Council will no longer exist after this reorganisation. North Norfolk District Council will certainly no longer exist. And secondly, we've got some way to go after this. After the submission of these basic principles on the 21st of March, with the eventual submission of detailed plans. And I'm hopeful that the distinctiveness of North Norfolk can still be retained in character, if not in terms of the geographic area as well. I think there's a large discussion to be had. I'm more and more confident, in fact, that the entirety of the district will go into a single unitary. But the focus has to be on building the sustainable foundations of a new authority in terms of the population size and tax base, reflecting the distinctive economies, opportunities and challenges, and to achieve a local authority that remains accessible and visible to our residents. I mean, certainly I think that last bit is going to be very challenging for what is, potentially half of the Norfolk area minus Norwich. But that is the challenge that the government has given us with the information, and we've talked, haven't we, about the lack of information we've been given and what we've got to work with. But this is, the collective output of the district councils. It remains to be seen, of course, whether the rest of them will support it. But I apologise for the polemic, really, at the start in terms of the loss of district councils, but I don't agree with this model. I'm open-minded, but I can't see it being beneficial for our local economy. So I put these proposals to you and welcome the debate to follow. Thank you.
Councillor Fredericks, do you want to? Yes. Are you speaking now or later? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you to you, Councillor Adams, for your sort of opening remarks. As explained, our group's view is that we will abstain because we don't know enough. I think the request from the government in 4 weeks to come up with a recommendation of something so complicated that actually bedeviled 2 previous attempts in order to reorganise local government 10 years ago, and then come up with some logical presentation is something of a nonsense. This is incredibly complicated, and certainly the speeches we've heard this evening so far are testament to the fact of they've brought in a number of the difficulties that we face. But the fact is, it's going to happen. Now, if had a Conservative government been re-elected last year, we wouldn't be sitting here this evening because we wouldn't have done this. We had another alternative option, which would have directly elect a leader model, which would have sucked a lot more money into Norfolk and Suffolk with minimal disruption to local government. But anyway, the Labour government's done away with that. They have a huge majority, and that's their prerogative. So we are probably all agreed that we need to try and see to come up with options that are the best for our residents in terms of doing that. Having said that, we are probably likely slightly more open to some reorganisation of local government. It could be challenged that 7 small district councils across Norfolk is not necessarily nowadays the most efficient way to do it, given they use all different sort of IT systems, and there could be some rationalisation there. But clearly we're going well beyond that at the moment. Where the concern really comes for us is looking at the Deloitte report. I realise I only had 4 weeks to do that, but frankly, it's got more holes than a Swiss cheese when you actually go into the detail of that. First of all, we start, and I think Councillor Fredericks rightly said, we need to all put our collective heads together. Absolutely right, we do. But coming up with an option which doesn't include consultation with the county council, to me, just doesn't work. We need to put it in context that the county council, as has been mentioned earlier, provides adult social care, children's services and highways. In total, it accounts for 75% of the council tax take, compared with, I thought it was actually 8% that goes to the district council, but in a meeting prior to this, the chief executive informed me next year that will be down to 7%, given the rise in the police and crime commissioner and local precepts. I'd hope as we go forward in the coming months, we can get that collaboration going with the county council to come up with some viable models that make sense in terms of that. The other concern I really have is around the 6 criteria that's based in the Deloitte report, because it's all based down there that they are all treated equally in terms of coming up with the scoring system, which comes forward with the recommendation for 3. Now, I appreciate in the feedback to the government, you are asking, is it right that they should all be counted equally? In my mind, it's a nonsense, because there are some in there that stand out as being absolutely critical. And the one is the second point in there. We must remember the whole reason why the government say they are driving this is to deliver efficiencies in local government. Now, we can all have our view whether that will be achieved or not, and I may be as sceptical as members across this chamber, but anyway, that's what they're saying they want to deliver. And even the Deloitte report makes clear that actually the 3 unitary option is the one that's least likely to deliver efficiencies. Way beyond that, though, is about financial sustainability for any councils. Last month, we went through a full council and we spent, God knows what, 2-3 hours debating the financial sustainability of this council going forward. And as we go through the year, we spend an awful lot of time and effort looking and worrying about that, looking at future projections. But that must be absolutely critical. I would challenge members, how can you say we're going to support a 3 unitary option? There's no figures in this Deloitte report which actually support that recommendation at all. And you need to surely do that before you can actually pin your hat to one of the things. Now, in principle, looking at the single unitary, the report points that that's the one that probably would be most financially sustainable. Now, I'm not saying I support a single unitary at this stage. I want to see a lot more information. But we've got to look at that. That's got to be absolutely key, because if it's not financially sustainable, we're going to end up in a position where we're going to be sitting in new unitary councils and we start running out of money. And therefore, we start running out of money. We won't be able to deliver all those crucial services that a new unitary is there to do. So I just think it's a real hole in the argument for doing this. Also, Councillor Ramsden quite rightly mentioned the benefits. What are the benefits of doing this? We don't know. There's nothing in the report that actually articulates what the benefits actually might be either. Something else I'd want to know. Now, putting context, I read in the EDP today, Andrew Jameson, who's the deputy leader of the councillor and their financial portfolio holder, is quoted as saying that the 3 unitaries would cost an extra 32 million a year and require an additional 10% in council tax. Now, I don't know where that information is based on, or that, until I'm not taking that by any means as gospel, but clearly somebody at county has been doing some number crunching. Well, if the districts have a different view, you need to start doing some number crunching too, in order to really promote the view of different options for that. Another point I'd make is just if you are going to split all those county council responsibilities out, how are you going to find the staff to do that? Now, I was speaking to a county councillor at the weekend, not a member of North Norfolk, from elsewhere, who said to me that recently they recruited for a very senior role at the county council and they only had 2 applicants. And of those 2 applicants, only 1 was suitable. So we're actually going to split out all these things into 3. Where are you going to find the top people? Because you get to areas like adult social services, children's services, areas which, to be fair, I know nothing about, being a district councillor, but one assumes that they're really complicated areas and you want really good people on top of their game running those departments in a unitary authority.
Councillor Cushing, I hate to be rude, but we have a 5-minute limit on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise. I thought we were open season.
No, I didn't open season the time you could speak.
Oh, I didn't get that.
Can I make a personal plea? Actually, we allow Councillor Cushing to continue?
I've nearly got.
It's his second bite of the cherry. Then shall we continue?
No, I think we should allow. You're not going to be going. I just think it's an important debate, and I think.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Right. Are you happy with that? Right.
I'm getting there anyway. I promise you. So that. So that's the other point I was going. If I do make one plea on the Western Unitary, I realise most of the members here would sit in the Eastern Unitary if you split it into 2 or into 3. But if you look at the numbers for this, if you go to MSSA to 2 unitaries, that map is the same as the 3 unitaries. So effectively, it would be just a third of Norfolk. So therefore, and this is something that's bedeviled, and when they've done it, tried to look at it before, that means the Western one would be the poor relation, because the economic powerhouse would be in the East. And even if you go to the South Norfolk option, which is taking all of North Norfolk, all of Breckland, all of Kings Lynn, it would still be sort of the junior player in that. And again, it comes back to my point, would that be financially sustainable? So I think if you are going to do more splitting up then into 2, then I'd want to probably try and see if there's a more equitable way of actually doing that. So, I mean, when I got up this morning, I didn't really think I'd be quoting the pearls of wisdom from Councillor Withington, but she was absolutely right when she said it's about getting it right. And if any useful words were said this evening, that's absolutely it. And I just don't think at the moment we know enough in order to get it right. So I just not prepared to pin my place my money on any one of the three options at the moment. Thank you. Thank you for your discretion allowing me to carry on. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Councillor Fitzpatrick, do you want to speak next?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think we need to take into account that seismic changes are definitely in the way. This is the biggest shake-up coming to local government. This is the start. Biggest shake-up since the Redcliffe Mod report of 1969, which was followed by the 72 Local Government Act. Out went in the urban and rural districts, places such as Great Yarmouth and Norwich ceded their county status, and the new authorities came into place in 74. Mind you, the first thing this council did was change its name. We've had then piecemeal change over the subsequent years. And I agree with Councillor Cushing, the elected leader model would have been preferable, but things have moved on. So we're in the position of trying to make the very best out of what's coming. And I personally think the current model has gone past its sell-by date. So I believe we do need change. What we're having to do now is embrace government policy. And remember, they both have the will and much more importantly, the huge majority in Parliament to put this in place. And I think they're going to be less than impressed that coming from Norfolk, their submissions are not joined up. That said, we all need to put egos to one side, I think, and ask ourselves, what's the best solution for my local area and then Norfolk as a whole? So in my opinion, wherever everyone thinks, we need to work together to do the very best for residents, because I sit in this chamber to support my electors and residents to get the best for them. So I'm not necessarily going to be wedded to or sticking up for the status quo in terms of current council boundaries, because if we don't get this right, it could take another 50 years to undo, because the boundaries at the moment aren't necessarily ideal. And I think, bear in mind, so many people that come to us refer to it at the council, whether that's at the parish council, whether that's the meet you in the street or the right. And I think sometimes we flatter ourselves that everyone's just quite as interested in the breakdown of how things go as we are, because we sit here. People want their bins emptied. They want local services such as libraries, schools, social services. And for many, the really big one is get the potholes filled and the roads repaired. So I think time has moved on, and remember that the way everyone does business has changed so much over the past 50 years. Costs have gone up, people have earned more. That's why costs of councils have gone up. Also, the government at the moment is looking at quangos such as Natural England. So devolution offers a chance to bid to take over some of those functions, because the government has made it clear that they're going to break up some of those functions. So it's a chance to take them for our area, and to use our recycled quote, if there is a bonfire of the quangos, it's important that we don't fragment what we're trying to put in place so we can pick up and run from them. I have to say I'm far from convinced that 3 unitary councils offers any real benefit, whether financial or in terms of scale, in terms of proper representation, because I think it will result in 3 disparate and very unequal areas. Norwich will be separated from its natural hinterland, and I think that will be to the detriment of Norwich, but also the hinterland, the east and west, on either side. We'll have 3 areas which have different clout. They'll have different clout in terms of finance, in terms of draw, and the question is, will the areas outside Norwich be seen as overly rural? And at the moment, rural areas too often get overlooked. So I think it's a real concern for me that fragments the clout of this. I think it could, 3 Norfolk Unitary as proposed in this, it would very possibly exacerbate the problems of rural areas, and I think the prosperous areas will become prosperous and the danger will become poorer. I don't think there's been a good case made out for 3 county unitary in this paper. You know, with time is short, but we need to get this right, because otherwise we'll suffer the consequence. I don't think I'll be around in 50 years' time unless they find some magic pill. But I think it's really for our voters. We need to get things right, and I can't support this suggestion of 3 Norfolk Unitary. There's not the scale, there's not the savings, and I think it's just wrong. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ringer.
Thank you very much. I think the first thing I want to sort of start by saying is that I'm proud to be a member of North Norfolk District Council. I'm proud to serve alongside people from Wells, from Stalham, and from everywhere in between. I think we do a phenomenal job representing our communities, and actually I'm reluctant to see that change. That's not a party political statement. I think that accounts to people on all sides, and I can look to my side, that side, and look to my side, this side, and see good councillors representing their communities. And removing that, I think, is is a poor thing for the places that we represent. There's talk about efficiency and moving from tiers, from district and county, and sort of trying to make that more efficient. But we're just replacing 3 tiers with 3 tiers. Let's be completely honest about that. We are going from parish, district and county to parish, unitary and elected mayor. Let's not pretend that this clears the muddy waters. It absolutely doesn't. I'm a little surprised and, to be honest, a little disappointed that the opposition group have indicated that they're going to abstain, particularly because by not having a seat at the table, we are just passengers on a Labour government journey, which I think is just not what the Conservative group here would want. We need to be at the table. I understand that the information that is provided to us is, very, very sketchy, and, it doesn't give us a lot to go on. But the more you look at it, the more it looks to me like the wrong thing to do at this stage, because we have not got that information. But the recommendations set out in this report say exactly that, which is why sitting on our hands and letting us go with the flow really is not what we should be doing for our members, for our communities. It does not do them justice whatsoever. So I will support this, and I would call for all councillors from all parties. You're all very good. I've got a lot of respect for all of you. And I think that if we sing with one voice, that will absolutely be the best thing that we can do for North Norfolk, regardless of how we expect the lines to be drawn on the map in the end. We need to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to those members who've spoken. It would be remiss to not acknowledge the perversity of this paper compared to the paper that we've just debated. In one hand, we're being given extra powers in the county. In the other hand, our local residents are potentially going to lose local government powers in the form of district councils. I've spoken to many members in this chamber about it from all political parties, and I don't know anybody in the room that agrees that this is the right thing. And we have said that in recommendation 1, that we don't agree with what's happening. This isn't what we believe our local residents want. But I want to just touch on our local residents who have been confused between devolution and LGR, and really are just trying to heat their homes and feed their families. And the biggest question that I have been asked is it going to save me my money on my council tax bill? And I have had to honestly say, the mayor will probably come with a precept, so you're probably going to see an addition. And as Councillor Adams alluded to before, there's going to be some equalisation of council tax across whichever unitary is formed. And for me, when I know people are struggling, this government is taking more money out of their pockets whilst pretending that this is a cost-saving exercise. This is not putting our residents first. And I'm absolutely disgusted with what is going on nationally and what is affecting our local residents, that this is a government priority. That said, we have to have an opinion. We have to put our views forward. And if we have to, reluctantly, I would support the 3 unitary model, not because I think that that's going to serve residents best, because our hand is being forced here. But we have to do something rather than sitting on our hands and abstaining from any votes, because I'd rather that our residents had a voice in this chamber.
Councillor Ponchard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I've got a sort of balanced opinion on this item. What concerns me is some of the things which have already been said, but around the speed of decision making required. I've dealt with planning decisions that have took longer than this entire subject. I totally understand and respect the standpoint of perhaps the Greater Norwich area, two of their major retail and commercial areas sit within South Norfolk and Broadland, not even in the City Council. And indeed, the major hospital itself sits in South Norfolk. So I can understand the need, want and desire of that Greater Norwich ideal, and I get that. My concern, I'm lucky enough to live in a town which provides local services and products and everything else to its hinterland, but it's those smaller parishes that will just get totally forgotten in a single unitary authority. Whereas the smaller models of 2 or 3, I'm not saying I have a preference either way, but more than one unitary at least would give some idea to represent those local things. And the whole ethos of this is about representing localism and local people, and I just don't feel you would do that through a single model. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Change is going to come regardless of what we think. Because the government is being quite dictatorial in the way it's attempting to impose these changes on us. However, if change is coming, we need to embrace it and make it work for our people. I might be unique here in that I've worked for a unitary authority for 12 years. Portsmouth is 6 miles by 4, a populate 190,000. Not something that you can really compare with the vastness of Norfolk. Same with Southampton, which I also had some experience of. There could be a very strong argument that Norwich itself forms a logical unitary, particularly with it in large boundaries to take in those areas of the surrounding authorities where Norwich is happily spreading to as part of the Greater Norwich Plan. There is no logic in then putting a donut around Norwich. You end up with a council, presumably possibly based even in Norwich, which is so far away from the needs of people along our coast. Certainly for those out in the Saints and the other way, and I can see conflict with Yarmouth immediately, it wouldn't work. It's not going to represent the needs of local people. Going for 2 rural unitaries, either plus Norwich, has a logic to it, particularly as we look back to the Deloitte report. That seeks to sort of say, yeah, we here have a lot of commonality with Broadland, with Great Yarmouth in terms of our economic base. Similarly with the West. I can see the arguments that in the West, yes, there are no significant economic hubs. Lynn, to some extent, Dereham, Thetford in the far south. There is a basis there. We are likely to be a greater economic force than the West, but we would also be much closer to the needs of the community. And that is what will be lost with the loss of district councils. We can be contacted. We get talked to in the streets. We can bring things to officers where needed. We know our district thoroughly. In a large unitary, even if it's either side of Norwich, will the same thing happen? If you're dealing with an issue in a village near Sheringham, for example, but the council is based in Yarmouth, will they take as much note as we would here? I doubt it somehow. But we are stuck with this change, whether we like it or not. We have to make a case for something that we think works, and the basic model that appears to work, it may not be the most cost effective, depending on how you work out all the costs. We know it'll put up the cost of council tax simply by adding the mayoral authority on top, let alone any other issues. But it is more logical in terms of actually keeping some semblance of local government relatively local, which we would not otherwise have. So I support the proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My heart is with the sentiments expressed by Councillor Ringer, but I think we all recognise that change is inevitable, and Norfolk has decided to get in at the beginning and have a say rather than have something imposed on us. but the government has gone at a gallop and we have been rushed. I mean, I think what we all want is positive local representation and excellent services that are financially viable. And I think in the very rushed time that Deloitte has had, it's done its very best. But I believe in evidence-based strategy and evidence-based policy, and I don't see much evidence here. Councillor Cushing has alluded to that, and so has Councillor Adams. I mean, we've got sparse evidence about the impact ongoing on council tax for residents. I think the alternative to being passengers is pushback. We need to say very loudly and clearly to the government, this is not good enough. You haven't given us enough information on which to base a decision. So, you know, I don't know which is the best possible arrangement, because at the moment, I just don't have enough evidence. I mean, and I think the thing is to shout out loud to the government that we need more, and this is just not good enough. And I know, Councillor Adams, that you've written to Ms. Nandy and haven't received a reply, and I think that's quite disgraceful, actually.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got comments against each of those recommendations, but I think actually we're kind of past much of the detail of that, and I'd like to probably pick up on some of the points that Councillor Ringer made. We certainly, I think all in this council chamber, aim to do a good job, and probably we think that we do. But I think we also have to be reflective and say, can we do better? Well, I can reel off a whole range of a list of ways in which we could do better. And we cannot afford to turn those away. We have to move with the times, and we have to look at our way in which we design and deliver services, the way in which we work as councillors, the way in which we represent our communities, and the way in which those can be improved over the passage of time. So we can do better, and we have to be open to those kind of opportunities and those requirements that we should respond to. At the moment, as I see it, we've got 8 councils that have taken what I would call probably an indulgent approach, actually, in proposing a range of proposals, coming up with a range of proposals. And they're all based on scant evidence, to be quite frank. And it's premature at this stage to come up with anything very concrete. But we do have to come up with something, because that's what central government has said. So for me, the focus actually is on what happens next. And what happens next is, after these proposals go in, central government should respond. And I think we should ensure and put pressure on make sure that central government does respond, because those proposals are quite diverse, and they really should be subject to some guidance from what central government is looking for, because I am a believer that the central government has a model in mind, and one way or another, we are going to head off in that direction. So the other thing that Councillor Ringer said was, we need to work together. And by Jove, we do need to work together, particularly after we get that feedback. Because if we can work together, and if we can come up with a consensus proposal by the 26th of September, which is a developed model, then we do stand a very good chance of succeeding to bring to Norfolk what Norfolk needs, not just the county, but our communities, individual communities' needs. So that's my concern. I think at the moment, what we've got before us, is one slant on a number of slants that will be presented. The merits of them are very debatable, and they are all based on scant evidence. And at the moment, I'm not prepared to back any one of them because, quite honestly, if anybody says to me, "And why have you backed this particular option?" I couldn't give an evidence-based reasoning why that is. And so if you don't know, then now is not the time, in my view, to nail our colours to the mast. But we do have to put something in. I understand that. So, but I do believe we are in the territory of extremely light evidence, and I have to say that from my own self, I feel that there is no alternative but to abstain. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Withington?
Thank you. A single unitary, I think, is so detrimental to North Norfolk that I can't even possibly consider it. And I do have evidence and knowledge that I think backs that up. With the geographical scale of the proposed unitaries with a single unitary, I think there's a great danger that the tourism sector in North Norfolk, which currently is worth 427 million to our area. And I think someone described it earlier as North Norfolk as an economic powerhouse, and we are. That sector will become lost with the pressures for social care, as we've heard already referred to, and children's services and SEND. North Norfolk is currently a thriving local economy with tourism. And as we saw at the Inspiring North Norfolk event last week, has also innovative and world-leading businesses. Unitaries on this scale, I believe, would put all of this at risk. It would become the bottom of the pile in terms of growth and development. I also think it will put further pressures on funding for supporting our communities and growth, in that what will be available to the new unitary authority will be much reduced and also will develop increased council tax. Partly due to, even if we split into three, a very well managed and financially sound authority such as North Norfolk having to take on increased debt from NCC and neighbouring authorities who are much more debt heavy than we are. We're also a very asset rich authority, and I'm concerned that our revenue, and I know we are seen as a good authority to court because we do have this. So as a carefully managed asset rich LA, I am concerned that the revenue would then be used to not provide the high level of discretionary services our residents rely on: temporary accommodation, toilets, financial inclusion offers, all those things that support our residents. But they'll get taken up by supporting that unitary authority. As we've heard, lots of people have said tonight, this is going to happen. And as Councillor Dixon said, we must come up with something. But for me, a single unitary, for the reasons I've already outlined, would be severely detrimental for North Norfolk. 3 is a worst case scenario, probably. And we do need to push back, as we are doing in recommendation 1, making clear we are responding, but we are stating we do not feel this is in the best interests of North Norfolk residents. And I agree with Councillor Dixon in that when we get our feedback from what they've said, we'll know whether they've listened to us or not. And I think there will be more work to do in establishing very clearly what the benefits and what the disadvantages are and setting those out. So this is that initial stage where we still need to stay in that conversation, and we need to show that we are prepared to fight for North Norfolk. We're putting our marker down in the sand, as they say. So for me, that's what this is about. And I feel very strongly that I would be in support of this.
Thank you. Councillor Housden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to admit I'm struggling, and I do agree with Councillor Dixon. And what worries me each time I read option 2 and 3 are the words "and the remainder of North Norfolk." And the paragraph at the end of that says the boundaries are currently being defined. As members here may know, I sit on overview and scrutiny, and this would really send shudders down my spine if we were having to look at this in overview and scrutiny and to come up with something sensible. And it really is very, very difficult for me to choose between option 2 and option 3. And it's not because I'm disagreeing with what Tim Adams has said and the context of what has been produced, but I find this really difficult because the lack of detail and information and the words "and the remainder of North Norfolk" really worries me. I don't know which remainder of North Norfolk. I don't think anybody does in this chamber, and that worries me. So I find myself in a really difficult position. I would like to follow this, but I may find that I'm going to have to abstain because I think it's a really, really difficult decision at this stage with the lack of information. Thank you.
Councillor Hankins?
Thank you, Chair. I think we're losing sight of the fact that part of this proposal is to devolve government, but also to devolve power and money. At the moment, we are the most, I think one of the councillors said this earlier on, we are the most centralised government probably in Europe, with the power rested on a number of unelected civil servants influencing ministers who are very new to the job, etc. So I think that there is an opportunity here to respond in a way in which we say, look, we recognise that this is an opportunity to take more power and more control. It's not included in this proposal, so that we need to understand what that means. I mean, I think on the basis of the Deloitte report that the 3 unitary authority is probably the most sensible. However, what does that mean in terms of how much more money will be devolved to those authorities that are not devolved now? I mean, we are preoccupied with the fact that we have to save money all the while, right? And that is because we're a relatively small authority where many of the decisions are made outside of our control. So I think we ought to remember that in terms of responding to this. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, because as we well know, the government has an enormous majority in the House of Commons. So, but I think we ought to be very clear on what we're looking for from a devolved authority, unitary authority, in terms of additional power and additional money. Thank you.
Councillor Toy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I get the arguments for the single and how it saves money and will bring the sort of structure that will deliver the economies. However, there's obviously lots of concern about the local representation, which I said about myself earlier. And so we've had to, as with all things, we've had to work to find something that addresses more than just the financials. And whilst savings are important, I mean, it needs to be sustainable. My portfolio is sustainable growth. Sustainability comes in many forms. So by having the 3 that we have here, what's been mentioned is that there will be inequalities. But whilst it's not part of this debate, we are proposing that there's going to be a mayor for Norfolk and Suffolk, and he should be balancing up the areas. So whilst there are some logic that's been applied to this, with the limited time and limited data that we have, it is incumbent upon us to make decisions. And I also believe that in going forward, when we get that feedback, and we continue to work on this, and it will take time to develop, that we must have faith in ourselves. We've sat here and said how we're here to represent our communities, to get the best for North Norfolk. Let's believe that we will continue to do that as this rolls out. And let's not, believe this is going elsewhere, that we're losing control. We will maintain control by being in there. So whilst I see the arguments on both sides, I think that this is the right proposal for this council to put forward. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. So I thought when I looked at this paper, I thought, well, if I look back in history, what does history tell us about unitarisation? And I realised that going back as far as 2009, when I wasn't resident in the county, so I come with no sort of preconceptions about the attempt back in 2009, 16 years ago. But I couldn't help but notice that 5 district councils formed a sort of consortium and a campaign to, quote, keep Norfolk local. And they actually did at that point have the benefit of a sort of a referendum, because they conducted an Ipsos Mori poll at that time on the single question of whether there should be just one unitary for the county. And that poll, the result of it was pretty clear. Around 85% of residents and only 10% of the 5 district councils, in terms of council votes, wanted a single unitary. It was said at the time, and it was said in a judicial review that was brought to the High Court back in 2009, that changing to a single unitary would cost tens of millions of pounds. Money that would be taken from existing budgets and topped up with extensive borrowing. So the savings were, quote, pretty theoretical, unquote. Now, I haven't noticed much change in the structure of local government in the last 16 years. So I think there's a great deal that we can learn from what happened back in 2009. And I did actually drop on a quote from the leader of Breckland District Council back then, Councillor Simon Wood, who said that the 5 councils did not want to see businesses and people in Norfolk paying millions of pounds for a restructuring of local government that they do not support and will not serve their needs. Now, I've listened to various people tonight saying, we haven't got enough information, and that is pretty incontrovertible. And I agree entirely with that. But I do want to just say I support what Councillor Withington said, that I know what I don't want. And I don't want a single unitary. I don't want an area which, is 20 Birminghams, 2 Luxembourgs, and a landmass the size of an average iceberg at the North Pole, to have to produce a system that creates councils that have elected residents who are elected to a unitary of between 8,000 and 9,000 residents to service. Our current county councillors service about 4.5. Ourselves as district councillors about 2.5 or just under. Because it would take the word local out of local government and local democracy. And if I hadn't told you that quote from Councillor Simon Wood was from 2009, if I had just said I read it last week, you'd have probably believed me. So I don't think a great deal has changed. So I know what I don't want. I think we have to support this proposal that's before us tonight to get more granular with the government. And I'm completely behind giving the government a, quote, bloody nose, unquote, for not responding to us, to sending out civil servants from MHCLG that I've come across in a couple of meetings recently run by the LGA to defend the government's lack of thinking, their internal confusion, which has been evident through the minister in the Commons, rather than coming out to us, the ministers coming out to us themselves. And I think that's lamentable. And it serves this government no credit that they are dealing with it in that way, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much.
Did Councillor Punchard, did you want to come in again?
No, it wasn't a further comment. It was if we were moving towards the dreaded look at the 4 recommendations, that could I ask that they be split out when we vote on those recommendations? Thank you.
Did anybody else want to speak again? Councillor Adams?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm not going to take all night about it, but I just wanted to respond briefly to some of the comments. So yeah, certainly we've only had, a few weeks to do this. I love the comment, by the way, by Councillor Punchard about the planning applications taking longer. It's absolutely right. And I think that really hits home. And
I'm not sure I can agree with that.
well, there are some planning applications. Okay.
I want strict proof from Councillor Punchard. I'll expect some case references in the morning, please.
Okay. Well, for instance, it probably is the timescales that we've been working to have been less than its time that it's taken to approve the McDonald's, for instance. So just to give one example, but there we are. I do agree. There's a lack of detail in terms of what we're working with, and we're all doing our best here to work within this process. And what we've got here is really an initial baseline and basic principles, but greater detail will then emerge, subject to the government agreeing that we can progress. And it could, of course, take longer for them to agree than we're expecting. We're expecting that feedback within weeks, but I think they've got a lot to look at, haven't they, in terms of incoming, and then we've got to theoretically work out detailed plans by the middle of autumn, by 26th September, I think it says. And I think some of those timescales are subject to delay as well, but I don't agree. We haven't worked with the county council. We've tried to engage with them very frequently. They've got a different perception and outlook on this entirely. Recognise that, not necessarily the place for this debate, but it would have been nicer to, I think, send a single submission with our different proposals on. At the very least, the county council didn't want to even do that. That was what the government asked for, a single submission, whether or not there were different proposals. So it just unclench your fist, county council, please. I mean, there's a whole county to work with here. I mean, my fear is really that the government's trying to look at and change or deal with local government funding without actually putting many more money into the system, and really just transferring much more of the responsibility to ourselves. And we're not going to see any of our national taxes reduce. It's more responsibility for ourselves. And I just think the single unitary will certainly put us in a worse position in terms of that cost. And certainly the boundaries, which I accept, a source of anxiety there, certainly for myself as well. I mean, since we've been working on this, I suppose I've become more and more confident that that will be allayed in terms of the geographic boundaries of North Norfolk going into a single unitary. an individual unitary, not a single unitary across the the county, just to clarify my point. But of course, that's to be determined and, you know, will be discussed in the lead up to the detailed submission. But yeah, it's certainly top target for me, really, is ensuring that the whole of North Norfolk is in that. But yeah, recognising that North Norfolk itself, in terms of the district council, won't exist. But I think what I really want to ensure is that as I was saying earlier on, the distinctive brand of North Norfolk in terms of its visitor economy and, you know, certainly the Broads, etc., is recognised. Something that really piqued my interest was a comment. I think it was made by Councillor Dixon about whether the government has a model in mind. I don't know if that was if you can remember if that was the word he used. And I've always felt from the beginning the government did have a model in mind, and I think that was that there would be a Norwich unitary. And I think really they've just been letting the rest of the county get on with it. You know, they've mentioned Norwich more than once in parliamentary debates, and it would have been helpful. It would have been, you know, saving a lot of people's time if they just sort of said this earlier on, to be honest, because it would have concentrated these efforts much better. I stand by with what I said at the beginning of the debate, and you know, a few others have touched on it. I do support a unitary Norwich. I do think it will be good actually for the rest of the county, and I do think it's the right thing. Taking into account some of the things that were said by Jeremy about, you know, the hospital even being out of the boundaries. But yeah, as I said, I'm absolutely remain to be convinced that this is good for the rest of us. So yeah, we've had, I mean, just to go back to the starting point here, really, and I probably said it to you before. The good thing is, when we started this discussion, we established really good working relationships and dialogue with all of the neighbouring councils, in fact, across into Suffolk as well, and that's continued. You know, we've not been sitting there around a table squabbling about anything, in fact, and I think that's been a really good approach, and you know, let's hope that continues into the submission of detailed plans. And you know, I really recognise the achievements of our neighbouring councils, and I've recognised that more so as a result of this work. You know, having a look over the neighbour's fence and seeing what they're up to a little bit more during this process has really made me appreciate the work that some of them are, that all of them, in fact, are doing. So hopefully we'll continue to work closely and collaboratively in that respect. Yeah, very important discussion this, and really welcome all of the everyone that's spoken. I think has spoken very well. So thank you for your input into it, and happy as well for the individual votes if that's members' wishes. Thank you.
I meant to jump in before you summed up.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You go ahead.
Can I not jump in before she gives her speech? I think I can. I mean, I struggle with the loss of the local voice and the locality in the unitary just as much as others do, but I also struggle with the disaggregation of fragile statutory services, and I really don't see how they can be spread across 3 unitaries. And so I'm struggling a lot. But I also feel we haven't really given town and parish councils the credibility they deserve, because I could see them as a bridge to the local voice if you know, whatever size unitary, it's going to be bigger than we are now. And I think we haven't given them the position that they will have in representing the locals. So I think there are too many unknowns, but I don't have the evidence in front of me that what we're proposing is going to be good from either standpoint, either for the local people who want to speak up, or they actually want to get really good social care or education. I mean, I don't think we're serving them well by what's on the table. So I think I'm very unsure. Thank you. Councillor Fredericks, do you want to sum up?
So when I became a councillor, it feels like a long time ago now, coming up to 6 years. You probably felt the same as I did, that we were doing the best for our residents and working alongside them and creating something really special in this council and working alongside the most amazing staff. And I still feel very honoured to be able to do that. So I struggle immensely that we are having to find a way to support our residents when it's not in our residents' best interest. It has nothing to do with the service for our residents. It has nothing to do with saving money. It has nothing to do with filling in support. Well, that's what we're really, really good at as district councils. We see the gaps and we put services in to support people. We get a cry for help sometimes on a Sunday afternoon or another inconvenient hour, and we're there to help. And that's why we became elected, I'm hoping. I know that I can say that for my group. So I struggle too with local government reorganisation. Andrew's right. Councillor Brown is right. I know what I don't want. I don't want a single unitary. And this is the line in the sand that says, no, we do not want a single unitary in Norfolk, because our precious residents and our precious identity will go. 3 is the best that we can hope for. And we have to put something forward, and that is our mandate. We have to put something forward to government on the 21st of March. And it is fast. And it's a lot faster than any of us are used to, let alone us being in local government for a while. We don't tend to use the word fast. But it's the best we can offer at the moment. And it's the start of a conversation with government. Without this, the government will not talk to us. We have begged. I have stood in front of the government minister and begged him to come to North Norfolk and talk to us. I've also done it publicly in a conference, and so has the leader begged. But they will not talk to us unless they know that we are serious about putting proposals forward. So, despite the fact that I don't want to see North Norfolk broken up, I don't want to see that, and I'm hoping that that isn't the case. We have to be at the table showing us that we want serious communication around this local government reorganisation. We have to, as Councillor Dixon said, pin our colours to the mast. We must strive for the best for the people of North Norfolk. And this helps us steer the conversation. Because otherwise, if we stay silent, then that gives the government carte blanche to come in and impose what they want. Governments are really lazy. You have to tell them what you want and give them a report such as this. Or they will come in with a red pen and they will cut and slash because they don't want to talk to district councils anymore. They want to talk to unitaries and they want to talk to mayors. So we don't have an option. But I believe that this is the opening of a door of our commitment to act in the best interests of the residents of North Norfolk as we were elected to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Netherway?
Thank you, Chair. Mine is probably a bit late to the table, really, but I'm looking on page 103 and we've got the government announced on the 5th of February that Norfolk and Suffolk were to be included, blah, blah, blah. And then it gives the timeline, the LGR. 21st of March, obviously day after tomorrow, that's when what we're discussing now has to be submitted. But the second line says 26th of September, final proposals need to be submitted. Now, does that leave the door open? Should we change our mind during the course of the next, whatever it is, 5-6 months, as more information, as more details, as more meat on the bone become knowledge to the council, does that mean that we can say, well, yeah, I know we said that in March, but now we want to do this?
So, complex really. I think, it's, yeah, certainly the detail, but not the principle. They're not going to obviously, move away, I think, from the current agenda. A lot could happen even in that short space of time, let alone until 2028. Don't forget that, we get near the next general election, lots of other spending pressures around government. If you recall, the government said at an earlier point in time there was no upper limit in terms of the areas, priority areas, and of course, lo and behold, there were 6 that were allowed through. And I think that paring back has really come as a result of the Treasury just saying, "Look, calm down. There might not be enough money to do all of this." And yeah, so that's just recognition that a lot can change even in possibly that short space of a few months. But we'd obviously welcome the detail, and I think it will be the detail that probably changes some of the narrative really. But I certainly think there's potential for movement around the boundaries and things like that we briefly discussed, but very little likelihood, I would suggest, in terms of the government shifting away from this path.
That's another way. Did you want to go back?
So if I've understood you correctly, then if this council goes back and says, okay, we want 3, in August, something comes to light that makes that totally untenable, which we couldn't and don't know. In September, we're still committed to that?
I mean, there's a lot of hypotheticals there, isn't there? Yeah. I think, it's sort of in the sort of realms of the impossible to really sort of project or predict. But certainly, what they're asking us to do is submit these basic principles at this point in time. They will then reply to say whether they want us to progress with the detailed plans. Clearly, those detailed plans will take a lot of effort for us to produce. My hope is that government say something to us that is clear and coherent, and don't just say, "Yes, that's right, Norfolk and Suffolk. You get on and you do your detailed plans." We need to hear that Norwich. We need to hear what they want us to do. There's certainly a fear of mine that they might just not do that. And then of course, all of that detail will be worked up into autumn. I'm not quite convinced that September 26th is going to be the deadline in my mind, because I think the government are going to take quite a long while even just to read these submissions. But we'll see what happens. I think the chief executive wants to speak. Thank you.
Well, just a point of clarification and to answer Councillor Knedaway's question. The invitation to engage with government over this issue was included within your agenda pack, including the letter of the 5th of February and the annex, which laid out those criteria. I was written to on Friday by the department to provide clarification around the submission of interim plans. And that says the interim plans are not a decision point. Decisions will be taken following final submissions in September. At this stage, we, MHCLG, intend to use the information you provide to tailor our engagement with you going forward to best support you in developing your full proposals. The more information you feel able to provide at this stage, the easier it will be for us to provide feedback. So we are expecting, after the submission of these interim plans, some feedback from government. We haven't been given a timescale for that or the detail of which the feedback will be provided. It would be hoped that there will be some structure to that so that we can really focus our work over the next few months. But in terms of the decision that's being made by this council this evening, it is whether you support the submission of the interim plan as detailed on your agenda with the 4 recommendations that are in front of you, proposed by the leader of the council, and duly seconded. But for your reassurance, there will be a report to full council in September that seeks your endorsement or comment upon a full business case. And that will be what officers and the leader of the council, working with other leaders across councils in Norfolk, will be seeking to do over the summer months. So there is a submission that is in public before the September the 26th deadline. I'm not quite so sure I'm as confident as perhaps the leader suggested that that deadline will change. I think the government will expect detailed submissions to be submitted by the end of September. But I do agree with him, there's a lot of time between now and then, so it could change.
Councillor Netherway, no, okay. Proposal that we take the items separately. Do we need to vote on that? No, we can just do that then. It's okay, so we're going to vote on each recommendation separately. So recommendation 1, disagreeing with the government's proposal to introduce a unitary, and all those in, are we doing it by a recorded vote? No, okay, so we're going to raise hands. Okay, those in favour? Against? None. And those abstaining? Okay.
So that's 23 for, none against, and 11 abstentions. So that's carried.
Okay, recommendation 2. Accepting that this is the position, we strongly object to proposals, etc. All those in favour? Yeah. All those hands down. All those against? And abstentions?
So that's 23 for, none against, and 11 abstentions. So that's carried.
Lovely. And recommendation 3, that we strongly support proposals for a 3 unitary council. Those in favour? Those against? None, and abstentions?
So that's 21 for, none against, and 13 abstentions. It's carried.
And the 4th recommendation is that the response to the government to be submitted by 21st of March makes reference to the interim plan proposing 3 unitary councils and the submission to be delegated to the chief executive and the leader. And those in favour? Lovely, thank you. Those against? And those who abstain? Okay.
So again, that's 21 in favour, none against, and 13 abstentions. So that's carried.
Questions from members? I think none received, and opposition business, none received. Notices of the motion, none received, and the exclusion of press and public is not necessary. So we will declare the meeting over. Thank you very much indeed.